welcome to The Download, where we bring you discussion and analysis from a Catholic perspective. Today's Tuesday, July 25th, 2023. I'm Bradley Eli here with my two co-hosts, Simon Rafe and Trey. And join us today, one of my favorite fourth chair occupants, Diamond Dave Gordon. Hey, Dave.
How's it going, Bradley?
Never appreciated disagreeing with someone more on set than Dave. School choice. It's one of the hot button issues in modern politics. The idea of letting parents who send their kids to public school get more of a say in what school their kids attend. This includes using taxpayer dollars to subsidize kids going to private schools instead of that money just going to the school district. In Arizona, the state superintendent of public instruction, Republican Tom Horn, has done some advertising this summer, drawing the public's attention in Arizona to a program called the Empowerment Scholarship Accounts. These accounts help parents pay for any schooling they want for their kids, from private schools to online classes to private tutoring and more. Arizona's Empowerment Scholarship Program has been around in some form since 2011. But state lawmakers last year expanded it to apply universally, meaning all students in the state who are eligible. Now, I went onto their site. I would like to read this for the sake of the public. They're dialing a few different aspects of this in Arizona. I just love it. I just love it. It says, this is right off Arizona Department of Education website. Parents, 3 paragraphs. Parents have the right to choose. Sure, parents are primary educators, right? What's best for their family? Wow, that could have come from Dave Gordon right there. And have their education tax dollars pay for the school that meets their child's needs. It's their money anyway, paying taxes, let's just redirect it. And the Empowerment Scholarships Account, ESA, makes that possible. Once again, this is right off the website. Next paragraph, with the ESA program, the money that would pay for that student's education in a neighborhood school follows that student to whichever school the parents choose for their child. This is awesome, including education at home. I mean, that's a jaw dropper right there. ESA dollars cover multiple education expenses, such as private school tuition, curricula, educational supplies, tutoring, and more. Fabulous, totally fabulous. I mean, that the fact that they even say, if you're going to educate at home, you can use your tax money and we'll redivert it to your own homeschool needs. I can tell you, homeschooling curriculums are not, they don't just give those away either. So kudos, hats off to Arizona's Department of Education. That really echoes what Trump's Education Secretary Betsy DeVos was trying to accomplish with the school choice tax credit program that she was having in charter schools and all that. So more about that later.
The only people who could be against that are just teachers union people. That's it. And remember, like, people who've dedicated themselves as agents of the deep state. Because ultimately, if it's your tax dollars and you're paying them for the purpose of education, they should be earmarked for education. It's not just that the government has a right to this money, and then if you forego use of that in the failing institutions of public disinformation, that you should just forfeit that money. Absolutely not. If your money is earmarked for education, it should absolutely go to the education you choose. And let's remember, the American public school system has been rotten from the beginning. It's been something that was set up by Protestant America to compete with Catholic schools, with diocesan schools, and then it was hijacked by libs. So we need to do everything to take money out of that and take people out of that, and demanding what's ours is the first step in doing that. Saying, these are my tax dollars for education. I'm not going to your failing schools. I'm not going to your institutions of disinformation and propaganda and, re-education. So I'm going to take it and use it on an actual education that gears people towards truth, not towards STEM and Common Core and all this nonsense that makes people producers for society.
I would say just the only thing I'd add to that, though, instead of these are my tax dollars, I'd first and foremost say these are my kids. Okay, these are my kids. And when you say failed institutions, you're not talking about just indoctrination and misinformation. You're talking about just straight up failure in educating, reading, writing, and arithmetic, scores in public schools. And because of the age-old problem with discipline in the schools, and I got that from educators back 25, 30 years ago. They said the one problem in schools is we're containing and not educating. Yeah. So, and that's because we can't have control of the class. because you don't control the class. Now you're going to have to repeat everything. Oh, Charlie said, well, this is Allie did this. No, stop passing notes. Oh, we got only like 15 minutes left.
Well, because the breakdown of the family.
Right.
You can't have teachers be in loco parentis when you have parents that have checked out at home and they're using public school as daycare, which they are, hence the shorter and shorter and shorter summers and the push for year-round school. It's become taxpayer-funded daycare. That's how it's being used. They even admit as much. And you can't substitute for absentee parents with a teacher.
I think you brought up a couple of interesting things there, Dave, that I'd like to talk about there. I mean, first, obviously, we're looking at this notion of saying, you were speaking very much of this idea of, well, you've got your tax credit, you've got this school choice, the school voucher, whatever language you're using in this sense, and okay, so you get that tax money, and you can leave the public school system, and you can go into the private school, Catholic school, homeschooling, and what have you. Another thing that's kind of sort of been glossed over here with this is that you can say, okay, this local school is kind of bad. For whatever reason, this local school is kind of bad. This less local school, even though it is still a public school, you have the option to come and say, well, my kid is not going to go to this bad school, the school that I say to be bad. It's going to go to this other school, and I'm going to take the money there. What you actually have at that point is you have consumer choice. And consumer choice is, while obviously, capitalism, consumer choice is an imperfect system, the invisible hand of the market, to bring in Adam Smith here, is actually a really good way of determining who does well and who does not, and who provides a good product. Because it's like, okay, you've got a bunch of schools, one of which is providing a better product, better education, better experience, what have you, than another. More people are going to want to buy that product with their money, which allows them to reduce costs due to economies of scale, which allows them to provide an ultimately better product, and that's what it does. That's why, okay, Rodney Peltier, your good buddy Rodney, okay?
Oh yeah, we go back. I taught Rodney math when he was 14.
Wow. Okay,
Yeah,
I didn't know that. Wow, that's how far back you
Tune
go.
into the download, you'll learn things.
I know, this is a good thing to learn. Anyway, Rodney, there is a point I'm coming to this. Rodney came around the office yesterday, and he had this ridiculous soda that was apparently the first carbonated beverage in the United States. Okay?
The orange ones?
It was the orange one that tasted like spoiled root beer, okay? And he tried this, and he was loving this. But you will notice that you can't get this outside of like 2 towns in Maine where they still use the pelt of small animals as currency. And the reason is because there are a handful of soda companies that have made a better product, and people have beaten a path to their door. And the same thing would ultimately apply to education. In this sort of scenario, these lousy schools, if you've got free choice to go anywhere, they either get good or they get gone.
Here's the thing, though. We need to dispel snowflakism in public education real fast. And I'm not saying that the way a lot of people are going to sense it first or think it first.
Can you define snowflakism for us?
Yeah. I'm telling you, I hear all the time, talking to parents that still send like Catholic kids to, or Christian kids to public school. It's like, well, our public school system in my locale is good. No, it's not. It's horrible. They're on board with LGBT. It's still terrible education compared to, a good Catholic school, or, you doing your duties as a parent and doing homeschool. They're not learning languages. It's abysmal. There's no such thing as a good public school. They're all bad. Some are much worse, like inner city failing ones, but they're all horrible. Like, I've never met somebody from public education and been like, dang, that's a well-educated individual. It just doesn't happen. They're all failing. So snowflakism being like, well, I agree that the system is bad, but my kid's school's really good, and they have really great teachers. I've met them. They're only talking to them about becoming a member of the opposite sex twice a week. Get this, twice a week. And they really only make them wear rainbow paraphernalia, once a week. It's a really swell place. It's great. And they're also teaching them that white men are bad, and that people of color are perpetual victims. Like that's public education. It's garbage, and that's just the propaganda being pushed, in addition to just the failure to teach like math, language arts, Latin, classics, all that stuff. That's all there too. It's the whole shebang. They're all horrible.
And as we know, they do this in Catholic schools too. But what you mentioned earlier about how you're not really educating if it's not directed towards truth, I want to bring up a quote from Pius XI. He says, there can be no true education which is not directed towards man's final end, towards his last end. What is man's final end? The kingdom of God, right? And that's something we both strive for and bring about here in this world. And I'm going to selfishly promote the show that I produce and the one that Dave hosts, Mic'd Up. That was the topic of their Dave's conversation with a guy named Chris Plants a couple weeks ago, where they were talking about the Christian vocation, how it's not just sitting around and praying or going to mass, praying your rosary, whatever it is. That's a part of it, obviously. But it's not just about getting to heaven or simply saving my own soul, but it's to rule the earth on God's behalf, like Genesis kind of breaks down. But the point of breaking that down is that if an educator, say a middle school teacher or a college professor or even like a little league football coach, if he's not keeping that in mind when he's coaching or when he's teaching, then he's not doing his job. Because then what is your education all about? It's not about man's final end, as Pius XI says. And as you mentioned to start off the show, the parents are the primary educators. So, and this is kind of what you're talking about with the public school system, and I think that is a big problem in the Catholic school system where parents just shuffle their kids off to some school, be it a public school or a Catholic school, and they think their job is done. And obviously, if the parents are the primary educators, it doesn't say the priest is or the bishop is. It definitely doesn't say the state is. If that's the parent's job, and they think that their job is done once they send them off over there, then obviously they're not doing their job. And I think if people realize that, I think society, simply put, would be in a better place.
It's a larger issue of the failure of individual Catholics to take responsibility for things that actually are their responsibility. Yeah. So it's this whole notion as well of saying, we have contributed to the state's coffers, which it uses for charitable works. Oh, I've done charity. No, you have not. You have been taxed, and then the state has distributed some degree of largesse in terms of, food stamps or what have you. Now, certainly fine. Do food stamps feed the hungry? Absolutely they do. But don't be going around and saying, well, I did my charitable thing because I was taxed. That's not charity. You were sort of forced to do it. And the same thing, it's like, well, I've educated my children. By doing what? Putting them on the bus at 8 o'clock in the morning to go to the school. That fine, yes, your tax dollars in many ways paid for that, but where was your involvement in your children's education? And not just the stereotypical idea of, well, I helped him with his maths homework, which is why he got a D as opposed to the B that he was capable of. But it's a question of, well, where am I getting involved? As we discussed on this very set recently, where are you getting involved in the school board decision-making process and voting for the school board? Where are you getting involved in saying, well, wait a minute, what is this curriculum, what's going on? Where are you getting involved with your kids and saying, before they go to school at 5, teaching them to read and write and do basic things? Where are you coming during the summer to say, okay, there's this great loss of education during the summer. What are you doing to prevent that from occurring? Where are you doing to instill in your children a love for literature, for music, for art, for science, and all of these kind of things? Where are you doing that kind of thing? What are you doing at the weekend? Are you going, and no disrespect to your chosen profession, Trey, but are you just going to watch the football game and watch the sports? Or are you taking your kids to museums and art galleries and that sort of stuff and instilling in them a notion of love of these educational things? That's an important point. That's what kids should be doing, parents should be doing for their kids as primary educators.
So we have a moving target, many people in the audience spanning different age brackets, and I'd like to take it back to when I was in elementary and also then on into junior high and high school. This is back in Montana. This is back in the 70s. It's a whole new world. We'll spare you the little ditty of that from the musical. But the idea is that when back in the day in the 70s, I had my parents had the opportunity to send me to a Catholic school. And I know some people on the panel here may think it's quite important to send your kids to a Catholic school. But I believe if I had been sent at that time in church history, in that place, in that locale, I probably wouldn't be here today. Because the non-nuns, who also taught us catechism, who I did go to their classes for CCD, had absolutely zero, nothing, zilch from second grade all the way till I was confirmed junior high school to teach us. And, even to the point, well, what's the Eucharist to you and to you and to you and to you? It's warm, fuzzy feelings. I'm floating above my bed. I'm quoting here from the class, somebody. And the teacher's like, a non-nun, saying, oh, those are all very good answers. Okay, on to the next question. I'm like, whoa. So, what's the answer? So hold on a second. So the fact is, my parents did send me to a public school, and at the time, looking even then and looking back, I have to say there was almost no woke ism there. There was no push for LGBT at the time. We are moving at an extremely fast pace in society right now, where it's, it's as Bishop Sheen says, things move faster towards the end as they start to pile up the cards. It's just crash, crash, crash. That's where we're at right now with racism and LGBT and everything that's just trans and all this stuff in school. We didn't have that back then. But it was almost nothing about Galileo, nothing anti-Catholic, almost nothing about evolution back then. I remember clearly that there was very little, if anything. We had very good chemistry, very good math, very good English. Well, English was okay. Science department. So we had good program of educating without the indoctrination. Now, that being said, yes, there was some people learning Latin back then. Some of the liberal arts aspects there, not as much as it would be good in homeschooling programs. True, fair enough. I get all that. But just the reading, writing, arithmetic, educating you for those things, apart from the humanities, which could be added at home, it was the only alternative. It was either that or going to the Catholic school, which they would have been deplorable in teaching all those things. So I wouldn't have gotten an education, and I would have got this phony sense of Catholicism along with it that I'd have to unlearn later on.
Brad, let me give my rejoinder now, because it's not just me. I'm not speaking Dave Gordon here. You hear me knocking public schools. No one should send their kids to public schools. This is Pius XI, Divini Ilius Magistri, which my Confederate Trey here was citing earlier. He says, quote, "There is no need to repeat what our predecessors have declared on this point, especially Pius IX and Leo XI. We renew and confirm their declarations as well as the sacred canons, in which frequenting of non-Catholic schools, whether neutral or mixed, those namely which are open to Catholics and non-Catholics alike, is forbidden for Catholic children and can at most be tolerated on the approval of the ordinary alone under determined circumstances of place and time and with special precautions." So, while sending your kids, I went 12 years to Catholic school, right? And I came out with a minor crisis of faith, which pushed me away from the church for the first couple of years of college, the first 3 years of college.
Still struggling to regain that.
Yeah, thank you, Bradley.
But doing
I
well,
appreciate you.
making great strides.
Okay, so yeah, I'm well aware of the dangers of Catholic school. Let it be said that it is necessary but not sufficient to send your children to Catholic school. And, I wish I had gotten, God bless my parents. They did very much for us. But I wish I had gotten more catechesis at home as a hedge against what I was learning at school. And I went to a more liberal Catholic school where I still got a solid, education in terms of like science and language arts and all that stuff. But I had religion class, not theology. Liberal, learned that there were many sons of God, not just Jesus
there you go.
in one class. That's poison. It's toxic. But we should have vetted Catholic schools better. You don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You say, well, I'm going to send my kid to a better, less liberal Catholic school. No one should go to a liberal Catholic school. You do have a duty to get your kids a Catholic education, whether it's by sending them to a parochial school, a diocesan school, or by giving them a good Catholic education at home. The problem with Protestant education, and it's what Trey was talking about earlier, and Pius XI talks about it actually later in his encyclical on Christian education, where he talks about each subject needs to be tailored to Christian catechesis, not just the general atmosphere of the school, but each subject. Show how math and science work to show us about our Creator and who He is. And that's utterly bereft. It's utterly missing, lacking in public schools because they were founded on Enlightenment principles. So even when in the 70s, before the woke stuff had happened and you're still praying in public school before class, it's still based on the Enlightenment idea of I'm learning science so I know lots of facts so I can do well on Jeopardy and earn a living.
Well, there's a lot of nuance that needs to be thrown into all that. One of the aspects is it's not just liberal Catholic education versus woke public education. What Betsy DeVos came to put on the map under Trump was private schools, charter schools, specifically those new startup schools that were there really to cater to education absolutely no indoctrination, didn't have an agenda except making you more educated in reading, writing, arithmetic, and have the opportunities for humanities in those programs. That was something that's missing in the nuance here that needs to be interjected, that it's not one or the other. The other nuance with regard to that is when Pius XI was writing, all the curriculum back then was with nuns in habit and teaching orders and all of this stuff. There was like still this Christendom society quite a bit intact still. It hadn't gone completely woke out the door yet. And Vatican II hadn't come along. Now, I'm a defender of the 16 documents of Vatican II, but how they were instrumentalized and ignored.
And the spirit of Vatican II.
The spirit of Vatican II
that's the problem.
Was toxic.
Yep.
So in that when I say it came along as a time frame, not a cause, but a time frame, after that, nuns went out of habit, out of religious orders, and they brought in all these people to start teaching at these schools that started closing down more and more and more. It wasn't the era of Pius XI, and to not recognize that is a disservice.
Brad, because I remember you were talking about earlier about how you had to sort of unlearn all of the stuff that you had, quote unquote, learned, going through the Catholic school system. I would argue that a watered down Catholic school is 10 times worse than a public school that is just completely woke. And the reason for that is, as you were kind of hinting at earlier, is because it provides, it pushes this false sense of Christianity on the kids. I coached at a Catholic school for 4 years, and I remember one of the kids that I coached, he came up to me, he was just talking to me about the faith or whatever, and he mentioned to me how he learned that Adam and Eve, that's just completely made up. Just little things like that. So they're learning, about Catholicism, and I think that's 10 times worse than having, because the public school system, they don't claim to be Christian educators. They're not they're state affiliated. It comes from the government, so they're not claiming the name of Christ.
Trey, I love you and you're my friend, but it's 100% wrong take. We're boys, we're tight. You're talking about getting beers this Friday. I hope that might still be on, but that's 100% wrong.
Trey, you and I are going to go drinking this weekend.
Yeah. I think Brad's on my side a little bit.
Dude, it's mathematically wrong. And this is the fact. Saying 10% error is more dangerous than 90% error is falsifiable and absurd on its face. I know, I've heard all the axioms. I've heard that the most dangerous thing for people is a truncated Christianity because it essentially, it immunizes them from true Christianity.
The state schools are not claiming, this is the whole thing, Dave. The state schools, the public school system does not claim by any means to be Christian educators. They don't claim to teach the truth. They don't claim any of that stuff.
Let me finish, though. I know. I get it. But 20% of the rising generation thinks it's gay. Propaganda works. That's why every dictatorship in the history of the world has a ministry of propaganda.
That's what they push in Catholic schools.
As much and as liberal as my Catholic school was, it never was pushing homosexuality on me or my classmates. It was something that was frowned upon, and this was a fairly liberal Catholic.
You're my age, Dave. You're my age.
I'm 36.
Okay, all right. Okay, fine. So you're 10 years younger than me.
More my age, actually.
Yeah, okay. You're 10 years younger than me then. I thought you were older. You're 10 years younger than me. I went to a public school. Certainly at that point, nobody pushed homosexuality. Homosexuality was absolutely opprobrium. It was completely unacceptable. Nobody told me that there are many sons of God. The only person who was described as a son of God was Jesus Christ. Now, that comes within a comparative religion class, and it was like Jesus Christ claims to be the Son of God. Christians believe Jesus Christ to be the Son of God. This is what that means within the Christian tradition. No one else makes that claim. That was come out and say. It's not a question of no one else is, and Jesus Christ is, but it's a question of here are the claims made by religions, and you're within this comparative religion structure.
And what year did you graduate? High school?
That's a Good question. I don't know. I can't remember.
Sorry for throwing you
I was
a
born in
Louis.
'77, so what, like 90? Yeah, 90.
So in the 90s.
Yeah,
something.
That's
92.
all well and good, though. That's all well and good. But then I have the beauty of both perspectives because I made the mistake of going to a public university for college, actually. And I know what my friends were taught in comparative religions class. They were taught that Christianity is an inferior religion. There's an outright hostility to the faith that's outside of Catholic institutions
Right, so now the
that is
answer-
not present inside the Catholic institution.
How are you
it's not just a
defining
gay
Catholic
issue.
institution? This would be my question. So, or rather, how is Pius defining Catholic institution when he says that every single person, according to you, watching this, has to pull their kids out of public education right now and find the money
And
to send
charter-
them to
charter schools are
and
public
charter
schools
schools
as well, so-
and private schools and anything that is not Catholic. So, what does Pius define as a Catholic
It would be
school?
canonically Catholic, meaning it has the permission of the diocesan bishop or local ordinary to operate. That would be the definition. That's
So
how you
Father
fix
James
the word.
Martin could open a Catholic school, get permission from Cardinal Tobin, and we'd be cool.
But remember,
right?
no,
no, but me, no buts.
a floor, not a ceiling. It's a necessary but not sufficient condition. You also have a duty as a parent, and he goes into this in the encyclical, that you have to avoid scandal for your children like it's the plague, because it is the plague. It's the plague for the soul, it's the plague for the mind. You have to avoid any source of scandal, whether it's government, whether it's school. He's utterly clear in there. So, like I said, it's a floor, not a ceiling. You have to, in addition to finding a Catholic institution or homeschooling them yourself, which
Well,
is what
wait.
everybody should-
Where does he say homeschool?
I mean, that's...
Where does he say homeschool, Dave? Let's play this game. Where does he say
Well,
homeschool?
the whole thing is about how parents are the primary educators.
But he
So-
says you got...
Yeah, absolutely.
The
It's in
quote
there.
is...
I don't have the quote right in
I
front
thought
of me,
the
but-
quote that you just read was you must send to a Catholic school, not you may not send to others.
No, you can't frequent non-Catholic schools, whether
So
neutral or
defining a
mixed.
Catholic
Public.
school, you just defined a Catholic school as one that is canonically erected by the bishop.
He didn't
So-
say Catholic schools. He said non-Catholic schools. You can take your kids and educate them at home. He says this is
that
your
a Catholic
primordial
school?
right.
Is that a Catholic
He says it's
school?
your primordial right as a parent, and you are to resist if the state or anyone tries to interfere with this primordial right. You have a duty to resist. The whole thing is predicated on the idea that the parents have the education of their children, and they're only, and this is in the Catechism, they're only delegating it to other teachers in loco parentis, but it's a delegation, and it's a,
But does that not go with your same argument that this has
Absolutely
to be
not.
no, that this has to be a canonically erected, that you've got to get
He never
permission
says that.
to educate?
He just
Well,
says
you said
avoid
that.
non-Catholic. Yeah, you
And
have
I
your
defined
primordial
how
duty.
does Pius define a Catholic educational establishment? Which I don't think your
He doesn't
definition
say.
you provide includes homeschooling at that point.
He does not say. He says don't send them to non-Catholic
Okay,
institutions.
Trey, what do
This
you
is
got?
my final take. This is my final take. And Dave, we're still going to go get beers on Fridays. If Friday, if you're
Just
down.
put something in your beer when you get
A Catholic school that waters down the faith. I'm not saying a Catholic school is pushing homosexuality or is pushing all the CRT crap on people. I'm saying a Catholic school that waters down the faith. That is worse than a public school, and that's my final take. This is a quote from it's a priest from a couple decades ago. He wrote it's called "Students Who Are Crusaders," and I think this encapsulates what Christian educators should be doing. Mainly, parents should be pushing on their kids. This is their vocation. The common purpose, which should animate the minds and hearts of Catholic students, is to build the kingdom of God. The reason that I say it's way worse for a Catholic school to water down the faith than a public school just teaching secular education is because if that's not what a student is learning, they're not being given their vocation to build God's kingdom, to be souls that magnify the Lord, and they're just watering it down. They're doing, as you said earlier, they're making it out like Christianity is just like everything else. And I really do think that is the worst thing you can do in this world.
I would agree with that. Now, the fact is, though, that Dave did make the case for homeschooling and say that that's completely in line with Pius XI's teaching. And that's the route that my wife take. That's the route that Dave Gordon and his wife take with their children. And I believe the reason for that is because, A, sending them to a woke school now. And I just got done defending, well, I went back to the 70s, in Montana, or in the 90s when, in England and whatever. You could get by without learning too much woke stuff. Today, by and large, any public school, public, not meaning these private charter Betsy DeVos ideas of really everybody's there to learn, everybody's there, open up your book, got my assignments done, we're all here to learn and learning's fun and we want to actually learn how to teach kids so that we can start to have public schools rise up to that level of teaching. That was part of her plan, was to have that be the leaven with which public school systems would rise. They say, wow, that's really, well, look at the scores you guys are getting, all these ACT, SAT scores, SAT scores. We want to be like that. Okay, if you want this money coming back to you, you got to start performing like that. But today, it's, you know, when you say avoid scandal, if these schools, I know the one you're talking about, if these schools are actually still falsifying religion, probably not as bad as in the 70s. In the 70s, public schools really weren't that bad. Catholic schools really were bad. Today, Catholic schools probably aren't that bad, but not, well, you're saying that some of them are bad. But public schools are completely toxic. I can't send my kid to either way,
sure.
Because as the primary educator, when I go on Judgment Day before God, he says, well, you sent him to this school. Well, Dave Gordon said I got to send him to school, so I sent him there. You know, I didn't want to upset God. He's like, look, idiot, this is the same scandal, like you're saying, that they're going to have a spiritual scandal versus this ideology.
I would say it's worse.
I would do it too. But I'm saying either way, public or poor Catholic, my goodness, watch any of Church Militant's coverage. You're going to say there's problems in the Catholic Church out there today.
Can I push David's buttons one more time? Do I have permission to do that? Because you just mentioned how, yes, you don't want to scandalize your kids. You don't want to just throw them in an environment where they're going to be in the near occasion of sin, of course. But that is an imperfect sort of motivation with regard to education. This title for this book or this paragraph, this little booklet that this priest put together, Students Who Are Crusaders, I think that's a more perfect, for the kids at least. You're training them to be crusaders. You're training them to be souls that magnify the Lord, to go out in the world, to preach the gospel, to evangelize. And I think, and this is a question, I'm playing devil's advocate here, if they are mature enough, if you are training them up in the virtues and training to be Christian men, you know, Christian women, all that stuff, and you do throw them into, I say a public school when they're like a senior or something, because they're going to go off to college or they're going to do whatever. I don't see how that would be, it's definitely, I don't see how that'd be intrinsically evil. If they're mature enough and you're preparing them for the world that they're going to be in, and they're ready, they're ready to go, and then they're there in those environments, preaching the gospel, evangelizing the people around them. And if you don't think that they're mature enough to do that, then of course not. But that's my point. He
actually explicitly addresses this within the realm of sexuality, because it was a thing when he was writing to try and desensitize people to lewd and lascivious materials and the sins of lust by immersing them in a sexual education. And he's like, no.
But give me,
hold on.
Gordon a response.
Okay, hold
on.
I want the magisterium to respond, because I am a Catholic and I'm a son of the church, and he addresses this through analogy, and he says it is not a good idea to immerse yourself in something, to desensitize yourself to it. Don't immerse yourself in a place of scandal. That is dangerous, and it's a foolish idea.
Well, that's the world.
Basically, I'm paraphrasing. These are the words of Pius XI. The fact is, despite all of, and when I talk about what I just told you, we heard in religion class, I think it was in some film they showed us, and then it was never corrected, that like there are many sons of God, not just Jesus. Muhammad and Buddha are sons of God too. Wow. I heard that. That's a horror story. That happened once in 4 years. Most of the religion education was squishy, but I did learn the basics of the faith, basic sacramentology, the basics of church history. That's good stuff. That's all positive knowledge, in addition to being exposed to the sacraments. You're saying kids would be better off in some godless heathen public schools where teachers are out there with like their size Z prosthetic breasts pretending to be women, like the guy in Canada, bereft of the sacraments, learning about something where all the subjects, they're not being pointed to God, they're not being directed to God, and a matter of fact, they're being weaponized against God. You're being taught that faith and reason are divergent paths, and that faith tells you one thing and reason tells you another thing, and you're cut off from the sacraments. You're telling me that's better because it's not 100%, you getting like 80% or 70%, that's not better than 10%? Hold on, let me also finish this point, because that's not even correct with what the church teaches by analogy with regard to comparative religions. For example, the church teaches that we're closer to the Jews than we are to the Muslims. We're closer to Protestants than we are to the Jews. We're closer to Orthodox than we are to Protestants. By your line of reasoning, if it were the case that there was like having 90% or 80% of something was dangerous to people inherently because they don't have the fullness of the truth, then the church couldn't teach what she does about comparative religions in that, Jews are better off than Muslims because they have a fuller vision of God, because that's not the perfect vision of God. The fact is, I got the Eucharist and got to go to Mass when I was in high school. Did you guys?
This is my final question. Hopefully it's a yes or no. Are you saying that if your son, or say whoever, your son, he's mature enough in the faith, you think that he's mature enough in the faith, and you send him to a public school when he's like a senior, are you saying that's intrinsically evil?
No, because even the Pope says that with the permission of the ordinary, under due circumstances,
well, of
basically,
course, if he's mature enough.
If it were intrinsically evil, by definition, the Pope couldn't give an allowance for it. No, right. Not if he's mature enough, meaning that if the thing has been vetted and there is no evil. I believe Pius XI in the encyclical on education said that parents have to absolutely, assiduously avoid any institution that could introduce error. This is an introduction of error. It's the complete opposite of what you're saying. He's saying you can't do what you're saying. Then you're making it the magisterium.
He's saying I can't send my son who's mature enough into a public school when he's no.
But if he's saying
that's not what he's saying at all.
Yes, he is. I can quote it.
That's ridiculous.
If Pius is saying you may not send it to any school that may introduce error, you may not send your child to any school. Because every school...
And you may not send them into the world.
To assiduously vet their schools. It's a huge duty. It's a huge responsibility.
And if you can't find a perfect one, per Pius, see, that's the problem. Homeschool, which is imperfect because we're imperfect people.
Well... Right. I mean, I don't know what to say about the perfectionist fallacy here. That's just perfectionist fallacy. You have a duty to assiduously vet where you send your children because their souls are precious.
Your standard was there can be no possibility of error, no possibility of...
I don't know if I said it with exact scientific rigor. I would have to quote from the encyclical, which I think
a question just to ensure that we get lots of negative Dave Gordon comments would be to say...
Yeah, please weigh in for negative Dave Gordon comments.
No, but in a serious question. So if this is a question of a Catholic may not send his child to a public school, what about Catholics who are public school educators, who are public school teachers? Do they, in your view, need to quit their jobs?
I don't know. That's beyond my pay grade. I wouldn't work for one of those foul, vulgar institutions because I know what's being taught. And I've come from education, right? I've been in education. How is that above your pay grade when you can come along and say that the very existence... If the Pope said what you just challenged me on, I would be like, yeah. But the Pope says what I'm saying.
But can you not use your human reason to be able to come out with a conclusion? Because if that were it, I'm just trying to square this issue. This is like saying, a man may not buy a copy of Playboy, but you know what? A girl can be a Playboy bunny. And it's like, well, obviously not.
Well, if your logic holds up, then I think for consistency, we're not going to throw out what the Pope says. For consistency, if you're saying that one is inextricably tied to the other, then it would have to be what you're saying. I would just have to analyze it.
I'm not saying anything. I'm asking a question.
I'm not sure. I would not teach one of those things. Cause as you guys know, I work with you. I work at Church Militant because the world's institutions don't like me and I don't like them.
I'll end it here. If I ever get married and have a family, I'm going to blindfold my kids until they're 18.
Right. Don't let them have any scandal. Because I mean, there's a lot of, in all the back and forth and everything, there's good points here that, you don't want to, you are the primary educator, that's a takeaway, okay? You are on the hook for what your kids are learning out there, which many parents didn't know until COVID came along, right? The whole, you got to educate at home because you can't go to public schools, and they're all like, whoa, what are you teaching my kids now? What was that? Racism, we're all racist, and LGBT and all this type of stuff. And things really escalated since then. But there is a takeaway. Parents are rightly involved with these school boards and saying, what are you teaching my kids? I don't want them learning all this type of stuff. But if you say there's scandal sending them to public school, I would say absolutely there's scandal sending them to these woke Catholic schools where they aren't getting the teaching of the Catholic Church. That too has to be vetted. And I would actually have to say we've reported on some local Catholic schools here in not favorable light. I don't want to call anybody out right now. You can go to our website about that. And the fact is, there is problems today with Catholic education. Burke, Hardin, and others, Cardinal Raymond Burke, and he's channeling Father John Hardin, who was actually commissioned by John Paul II to teach the Catholic faith, Catechism, Catechize America, was saying there's a dearth of Catholic catechesis going on, and that actually caused the crisis. Right or wrong, good or bad, you believe it or not, but for 50 years they said the lack of Catholic catechesis in schools, at home, from the pulpit. You know, you got the triangle. You got the teacher, and they're kind of like non-existent anymore, that are teaching Catholic education. And you have the priest, and he's not preaching catechetical homilies. And you got the parents, well, I thought you were learning that in school or something, you know. So they're not doing anything. And they haven't been for 50 years. So when you got that triangle gone, the kid's in the middle of that triangle, and he's just going along. And that's for 50 years. So we are in a crisis of faith. We don't know our faith. Even though I went to catechism, since second grade till 11th, I didn't know the 10 Commandments. I didn't know the 7 Sacraments. I was 22. I mean, I went to Mass every Sunday. I couldn't list all 10. I couldn't list the 7. Okay? How many persons in the Trinity? 3, maybe? Or 4.
Right, isn't this an ultimate self-own? Because I knew those in second grade before I was put into communion
Didn't
class.
ever have any of those. We didn't have catechism. We just learned little ditty songs like I am special, can't you see? I mean, that might be why I have a little, you know, challenge of pride, things like that. But the thing is, when there is that possibility of scandal or lack of education, all the solution continually goes back to the parents. And ultimately, 2 guys on the panel here have kids, and 2 guys on the panel, what did we decide? Catholic education or private education? Neither. 2 guys on the panel have children, and we said neither are good. Homeschooling is the answer for us as primary educator. You think it's easy? You think it's easy to just go ahead and, you know, get the curriculum all searched out, and here it is, and administer that on a faithful basis every single day? It's not. And you're willing to do that for the sake of your children because it's easy just to send them on the bus to school and let somebody else take care of it. But at the end of the day, you know that didn't get taken care of, and there's things that are introduced that you don't want your kids to be exposed to. Well, and that's in Catholic schools and in public.
You see, and ultimately, I think that's what it is. You know, the issue is this whole business of, like, you know, that Catholics are very eager. Traditionalist Catholics, you know, conservative Catholics are very eager to come out and say, well, you know, parents are the primary educators of the children, so I should be able to decide what you, educator, you, teacher, are going to teach my kids. If you want it done, do it yourself. And I think that would kind of be the thing. Now, it's all the question of do it yourself in the absence of a professional educator in a Catholic school, in a private school, in a public school, wherever they go. It's not the question of that. It's the question of, again, this should be at home. Kids, I was able to read and write before I went to school because my father taught me. I start school at 5 in the UK, so I was able to read and write at that age because my father taught me. I remember distinctly my father putting the polish on mathematics, because that's what he was very good at. He put the polish on me for mathematics when I came back from school with questions. My mother did the same with arts and letters. So that's the kind of thing that should be done. And this isn't necessarily a question of saying, okay, maybe you as a parent are not a person with a degree or any real degree of formal education, but you know what? You can encourage your children to engage in intellectual and academic pursuits. You can encourage your children to engage in what in the UK we refer to as vocational things, so like learn a trade. How many fathers out there have taught their sons how to swing a hammer? Okay, now, how many fathers out there actually know how to swing a hammer because were they taught by their fathers? Okay, maybe you're going to have to go back a few generations to find it out. YouTube, you know what? There's a whole bunch of stuff there on YouTube, and we've discussed this. To swing a hammer, to use a saw, to turn a screwdriver, the basic principles of electrical work in your house. Or even to cook and to clean. How to cook and to clean. That should obviously be, these should be practical skills that are being learned, because in many ways, you know, we've got to this point now where, yes, as Dave and everyone on the panel has said, education has become this indoctrination factory. It's become this factory to indoctrinate people within this woke idea that we have. And it's like, oh, we've lost this notion of reading, writing, and arithmetic. Okay, with the best will in the world, in a practical question out there, you need to be able to read enough to read the pieces of paper that come across your desk, your table. You open them up. It's your letter from the bank. It's a letter from the government. Can you read that? Can you understand it? Can you formulate and write a response? Can you process the news that is coming in through the television, through the newspaper, online? Can you process that? Can you do arithmetic to balance your budget? Can you cook? Can you clean? Can you repair stuff around your house? Can you understand the kind of vaguely the noise your car engine is making so you know whether or not you need to replace the oil or you need to take it into the shop. These are the practical steps that human beings need in order to raise good, faithful future citizens of heaven. That's the point. Nobody is going to be asked, not even Thomas Aquinas, who is like, the intellectual giant. We talked about him, a week or so ago. No one is going to be asked at the gate of heaven. St. Peter's not going to be there and go, okay, show me your CV, show me your resume, show me your transcripts. What was your SAT score? No one's going to be asked that. They're going to be asked, how much did you love? And that needs to be the primary focus of education.
I think that's what I was. So I remember when I was a freshman in college, I went to a decently conservative and a decently Christian college. My freshman year, a lot of those, the guys coming in, they were homeschooled or they may have done the Catholic school thing or whatever. But I remember a lot of them. They came in, and because it was the first time they were on their own, they just went crazy. They had their first drink of alcohol, and they just they were the ones throwing up at like 3 o'clock in the morning in the dorms or whatever. But this is my question: How do you balance? Because we know that vocation, as you and Chris Plants talked about on Mic'd Up, that vocation. How much do you love? Your vocation is to bring about God's kingdom. It's active. It's not just purely defensive. You're not walking through this world scared. Perfect love casts out all fear. So that's not the mentality. It's not an afraid mentality. It's active. You're pushing through. You're evangelizing. You're preaching the gospel. All that stuff. How do you both make sure your kids are not being scandalized, but also remind them and sort of put them in environments where they are, where they are being pushed to that vocation?
Well, I have one example for that, and that's the humanities, the classical curriculum. And the humanities of the great works, you're actually helping to form their character through the reading cycles that you're promoting at home. That you're not just rightly so teaching them how to swing a hammer and saw and fix a car. Those are part of rounding out the character. We're not just there to teach them reading, writing, arithmetic, which is part of homeschooling. We're not there just to teach them this is what the Catholic Church believes, but you're there, I believe, when they say on the Pius XI level of formation, of integration. And that means character development. And that character development happens a lot with, reading the lives of the saints and writings of the great works and great minds who have thought about these things. And along this line, there was a part of education we really didn't get into very much, which is classical education. And I want to say that when I was 18 and going into petroleum engineering, we were well aware at the time that we were being trained to do a job. We were not being educated. I'm up to here with math and science and all these things, this knowledge of how to do a job. But we were aware, we had the conversation at this time when I was 19, amongst my fellow college buddies, that we were not being educated. We knew that at that time. That we knew about Christendom College, Thomas Aquinas College, that these guys were being formed, their characters before they were learning they were learning how to think on a fully integrated level, and we had the conversation that we were not being educated in that way. And not long after getting out of college, coming to find out that more of the oil companies actually wanted to find those integrated individuals, because they're like, you know what? Dude, you can think, and you're a good person. Don't worry about the science. I can teach you that stuff in a 6-week course somewhere. We'll have a special seminar that you can learn how to drill oil wells. We need you at our company because you're a good person. And so that was really an eye-opener that back then. So that don't underestimate the need for classical education, great works, humanities, that character formation and development. First and foremost, it starts by the example of the parents and how they're living in the home and prayer.
That's
and all that.
John Sr. from the University of Kansas back in the 60s. There should be a whole show on that. John Sr., he was there and he converted all these people. That's what the Clear Creek Abbey in Oklahoma. Okay. That was started by a bunch of hippies who he basically converted back in the 60s. And it was they were all smoking pot. And there's two bishops now. I forget their names. There's 2 current bishops right now who were in that. It was called Integrated Humanities Program back in the 60s.
They stopped smoking pot by now.
Well, I don't think they were smoking pot, but maybe they were. I'm not not sure. But needless, they were converted. One of them converted to Catholicism. The other one sort of had a awakening, awakening of his own Catholic faith. 2 bishops and a bunch of guys who left the University of Kansas in the 60s to go start a Benedictine monastery, which is right now it's in not Kansas, Oklahoma, Clear Creek Abbey.
Clear Creek.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And I think that's to Trey's point too. When you're, whether you're 18 and finishing off your last year, getting some whatever, or you're 19 actually in college somewhere. And I know some parents are like, my kid's not going to college until he gets a couple years of, local. What's the local colleges?
Community
colleges,
college.
thank you. And I would be along that line too. It's a lot cheaper. You stay at home and you get protected and all that. A couple more years to mature and stuff like that. And everybody wants that for your kids. But the idea that you have to have character development, that has to be a formation so that they are equipped and prepared to make all those adult decisions when they're out in that adult world out there. So they're not the first year in college, getting drunk and all sorts of bad decisions being made. That's when you say primary educator, I mean, first and foremost, when you say you go before God on Judgment Day, did you form your child to be a good, son or daughter of God in first and foremost? And I think a lot of even trad parents and stuff, here's your breviary, this is your missal, and this is, you kneel up at church and you say the prayers. But are you becoming a good person? Mm-hmm. And that's what we have to really be focused on as parents first and foremost, and everything that's going to stop that formation. So, any final thought, Dave?
I would say there absolutely
30 minutes
what you
or
guys
less.
are
30 seconds.
What you guys are on about right now is absolutely correct. Education tends to be passive. It's something that sits in our minds, and that's a lot of times mothers are primary educators, and that's one of those marks of femininity is passivity. But the fact is, this is why you have the 2-parent household, and it's precisely you get this activity and putting into practice that which is latent in the mind from the father. And we're seeing a lot of failure to make the rubber meet the road with education in terms of lived praxis, exactly because the father has dropped out of the picture and
Absolutely.
Christianity has become feminized.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for joining us for today's episode of The Download. Don't forget to downvote Dave Gordon in the comments below. And now please join us as we finish in prayer, begging Our Lady's intercession for our nation, our church, and for Dave Gordon. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Salve Regina, Mater Misericordiae, vita dulcedo et spes nostra salve. A te clamamus exules filii Eve, a te suspiramus gementes et flentes, in hac lacrimarum vale. Ea ego advocata nostra, ilos tuos misericordes oculos, ad nos converte, et Iesum benedictum fructum ventris tui, nobis post hoc exilium ostende. O clemens, o pia, o dulcis Virgo Maria. Amen.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Thank you again for joining us for The Download. We premiere a new episode like this every weekday, probably not as contentious as this one, at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. From all of us here at Church Militant, God bless you.